of talking to you about the whys behind the whats. Here's what I mean by that is there's lots of stuff happening at the Christian Life Center, lots of stuff all the time, and what we don't want to get lost in all the doing is the purpose behind all the things that we do. And so each week we try to highlight something that we're doing, explain to you why we're doing it. And over the next several weeks, there'll be plenty of stuff to highlight from upcoming Christmas sermon series, an upcoming Christmas event called CLC's Merry Little Christmas Party, and some upcoming ways by which we're going to do some collection of food to be able to distribute. And there's some discussion on both this year's budget, where we are in the budget, 2021 financial budget, all those things, which has lots of information to cover. And so the next several weeks, keep tuning back in or log in later, and because we got lots to cover, a lot of stuff happening, and a lot of reasons why those things are happening. And so each week, that's what we're going to cover. But I thought I'd do something a little bit different today. I think we're 3-4 months in to this weekly vision update. And so every now and then, I just kind of want to share with you what I'm thinking. Right, so what it is I'm thinking about, and why it matters, and what it could potentially mean for us. And so most of the time I try to get the whole idea and the whole plan and kind of the whole strategy put together, packaged, walk through multiple layers with staff, elders, and then kind of put together. Right, I just want to kind of share with you some things that are on my mind right now as it relates to what's going on in our world and what's going on with our church. And most of what I think about as it relates to our church is actually how we go about achieving the mission we believe God has given us at the Christian Life Center. And as a reminder, here's the mission. It's going to be right above my head. Here it is. Our mission is to make it simple for people to connect to Jesus and one another. And you'll see in a couple of weeks that making it simple is really, really complicated. And yet we do believe that's what God's called us to do. It comes from passage of scripture I just looked at not too long ago, Luke chapter 3, verses 4-6. It's John the Baptist, Jesus' predecessor, declaring that the Messiah is coming. And he says this: prepare the way of the Lord, make straight paths for him, remove every mountaintop, fill in every valley, make every crooked path straight, so that all mankind, depending on the translation, can see or know or understand God's salvation. So John the Baptist is quoting Isaiah 700 years earlier, who's saying that there will be a Messiah. And our role in this coming king and coming kingdom is to prepare the way. In other words, we get to remove the obstacles. We get to make it simple for people to connect to Jesus, because you and I know we can't save people. We can't fix people. You and I can't save or fix ourselves. But we have this deep conviction that if we could get all the junk out of the way, if we can remove the obstacles so that people could see Jesus, then maybe God could show them his salvation and bring radical transformation, radical reformation into their lives. And inevitably, we understand that this that not just knowing Jesus was so important. Jesus tells us in the beginning, and him and his father tell us that he looked at Adam first and man, and he looked at him and says it's not good for man to be alone. So we do understand that while God loves us, cares for us, wants us to know his salvation, and wants us to be with him forever, there's something really significant about not just our relationship with our Heavenly Father, with Jesus, but relationships with one another. So we think a lot about how do we make it simple for people to connect to Jesus and to one another. And so most of what I'm trying to think about is how do we do that? Now, we have a strategy for that we talk about fairly often, and let me put it up here on the screen so you can see it right here to my left, your right, maybe. Yes. No, your left, my right. Here it is, to my right. Right? And so our strategy is kind of a threefold thing. We think about these things all the time. How do we build excitement? And then how do we build foundations, and how do we build bridges? And one of the things that gets lost in translation sometimes in this, because as I hear from you, is the excitement piece. Many of you probably think or consider that to be kind of the flashy stuff. The fact that we have a big movie screens and a 20x10 LED screen and fancy graphics and fancy videos and a rockin' band and all those things. And those are the things that Facebook posts, all those things. Those are things about excitement. And while those are fun, that's not the kind of excitement that we're actually talking about. Maybe those things all point to what we should be excited about. But what we're talking about specifically is How do we help people get excited that there is a God who sees them, knows them, loves them, and wants to be with them forever? That's what we're talking about. How do we help people see that? And it's interesting. Jesus makes this statement in the scriptures. He says, hey, at some point, a Son of Man's going to be lifted up. And when he's lifted up, he's going to draw people to himself. Now, he's referencing the fact that one day he will be resurrected out of the ground. People will think he's going to be dead, and his resurrection power, that spirit, is going to lift him up. And then 40 days later, he's going to go and ascend, meaning go back to heaven, go back. And so when he's lifted up, at those moments, people are going to see his resurrection power, see the life that he promises for all eternity, see the hope, and see his salvation, and he's going to draw people to himself. But what we get to do in terms of the building excitement is each and every week we get to lift Jesus up, right? We get to remove all the obstacles. We get to hold Jesus in high esteem. We get to sing songs about Jesus. We get to sing songs to Jesus. We get to open up the Bible and read Jesus' words. So hear from him and learn about Jesus and his heart, right? And we get to pray to Jesus. And so when we're talking about building excitement, getting excited about lifting Jesus up, what we're really talking about here is this. We're talking about how do we worship God. So part of our plan here at the church is each and every week is how do we actually every single week make much of Jesus? How do we create an environment that people can walk into, obstacles removed, so they can see and understand Jesus, so that every single human being in our community can either accept or reject the claims that Jesus has made, that they could see him and know him and understand his grace and mercy and understand that he has a plan and a hope for them, right? So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about building excitement, that people should be able to worship God, which is why we're trying to figure out how to double down on creating a good online environment on Sundays and throughout the week for you all to be able to worship God so that you can be excited about it. That's why we're trying to figure out how to create a good environment out in our parking lot so people who don't feel safe walking in the building, even with a mask, can worship God in the parking lot. That's why we're trying to create space in our sanctuary and make sure we keep it clean and ready and properly labeled and roped off so that you can feel safe while you worship God. That's why we're having conversations about how to use other parts of our building and other facilities like New London Presbyterian Church to create more capacity for more people to worship God and deal with some of the restrictions that many of you would ask for and many others of you would ask not to have, right? So we're asking those questions. And so what I'm thinking about is how do we make it simple for people to connect to Jesus and one another? And for us at a church, a significant part of that is each and every week, how do we worship God? Now, here's what we believe. We believe if you spend time and energy worshiping God, like when you see him and know him, what happens inevitably is that creates some passion in your life, and you go, if that God really is a hope for me, if he's really real, then what does that mean for my work and my marriage and my life and all those different things? So what we believe is, as a result of building excitement on that, inevitably what happens is people decide that they want to tether their life to Jesus or build their life on Jesus. In other words, they want to build a foundation of Jesus on their life. And so we think a lot about how do we help you build foundations. But another way to say that is this: how do we help you grow up? Right? If Jesus tells us in John 10:10 that the enemy came to steal, kill, and destroy, but he came to give us life and life to the fullest. How do we help you learn about Jesus, become more like Jesus, and grow up and do those things? And so we're trying to figure out how do we help you do that. And we believe a big part of that is actually self-identifying and being known in community. So a big portion of growing up, which I'll tell you about in terms of what I'm thinking in just a few minutes, it has to do with how do we do groups. Now, kind of the guiding thought for us on this was, okay, if we can help build excitement where people get excited about Jesus, they self-identify, want to start building a foundation of Jesus. As they become more like Jesus, they can't help but do the things Jesus did. And the things that Jesus did was he went, he served other people, and he reached out into his community. So the third part of this is we think about how do we actually build bridges, right? How does, as a result of learning about Jesus, becoming like Jesus, how do we, and learning to serve like Jesus, how do we actually go and build bridges into our community? The Greek word, the Latin word for priest in the scriptures, in Latin, not in the scriptures themselves, is the word pontifex, right? For priest, and it literally means bridge builder. So inevitably, as we become more like Jesus, how do we build bridges? Or another way to say that is how do we reach out into our community? You see what happens as we reach out to our community, more and more people become intrigued about the possibility that God could love them or he could be real. And so guess what happens? More and more people uh, become open to that possibility. Maybe they show up on a Sunday morning in our sanctuary. Maybe they log in online or pull in the parking lot where we lift Jesus up. And guess what he's doing? He's drawing people to himself. And as he draws people to themselves, they tether their life to him. And then they grow up. And as they grow up, they serve him more. And as they serve him more, when people get intrigued by who Jesus is and they show up, you see, it's just this cyclical pattern. But one of the things that I've been wondering recently and really, really thinking about as I communicate with many of you, particularly in light of kind of the last 6 months of COVID, there's kind of one of the things that let's become aware of is there's a lot of people that are struggling. Now, there's some people that their finances are up, life is better, and I'll share with you in the next couple of weeks kind of what's going on with church finances. But that life is better, more work. But for many people, it's just the opposite. In fact, many folks in higher ed right now are experiencing massive layoffs and trying to make plans for what their new career path is. And one of the things that happened early on in all this was the small business loans or grants that sustain things for a little while, and the unemployment payments or insurance that provided some income for families. And many of you have been kind of banking on kind of another round of those, and that just hasn't happened yet. And so there's some fear and some worry. And they also know of a lot of people who are just really, really lonely right now because they just have to shelter in place. And so I've heard from many of you as you wrestle through that and go, okay, what's our church, not the church, but what's our church, Christian Life Center, doing about those things? And some of the things I'm picking up on there, and they're fair, and this is what needs me to really be thinking through all this stuff. One is I think many of us, are kind of waiting for the next big initiative or push from our church, like when we go into First Friday, or when we try to pack 1,000 shoe boxes, or we go into Link University and move students in, or get care packages together, or bake cookies. And many times I think many of you are going, okay, when are we doing those things again? And I'll tell you some options that we have coming up in the month of December where we'll actually be able to meet some real felt and tangible needs in our community, and there'll be ways that you can do that. So that's one of the things you're waiting on in this. And I would go, man, that's pretty important. But what I've also heard from many of you is that you have deep convictions and passions and ideas about what you wish we all would be doing right now. And many of you have even expressed, some of you have expressed some disappointment that you've had these ideas and these plans, and you've even brought them to a staff member or leaders within our church and didn't feel the support that you would have liked in that. And a few have even used the word, I'm so thankful for this feedback, the word gatekeeper, right? Okay, we want to do mission, we want to reach out, we want to build bridges, but it feels like we're supposed to bring these to the church, and the church staff leaders will go yes or no, we'll fund it, we won't fund it, and kind of serve as the gatekeepers to whether or not we're actually doing mission in our community. So you get that piece that's pretty significant, and I go, that's what I'm thinking about. We got to figure out how to solve that. Now, on another piece, I've been really, really wondering whether or not reaching out is a byproduct of growing up, or if reaching out is actually the way by which we grow up, right? Is it possible that we keep wanting to grow up, and inevitably go, once we grow up, then eventually we'll serve? But what if the way by which we grow up is actually by serving? What if don't need to have the information, know the stuff, have the group before we actually can go and serve? And I think there's some precedence to this. In Matthew 10, Jesus takes his 12 disciples who know very little. I mean, they've seen him do some fancy stuff, make lame people walk, blind people see, dead people live. I mean, it's a pretty miraculous stuff, but they haven't actually done the stuff. They've just been witnesses to it. And then Matthew chapter 10, he splits them up in pairs of two, and he tells them, don't take anything with you, no money, no extra clothes, and he sends them out into neighboring communities to go love that community, to go find people of peace, right? And as they were there, they realized that God had given them authority and empowered them. and covered them with his blessing and his identity and a promise to be with them forever, right? It was actually in doing those things that they were growing up, not that they grew up and then they did those things. You follow? Like, this is the chicken and the egg, and it sure seems like they kind of happen simultaneously, that growing up happens by serving other people. So the question is, how do we help every single one of us serve other people, and how do we get our staff or get whatever it is out of the way that feels like a gatekeeper to make those things possible? So what happens for Jesus when he splits them up in pairs of twos is what creates tension got their attention, right? You know that. You know when you have a test, or you have someone coming to inspect something, or you have family coming over, all of a sudden that tension gets your attention, and boy, do you get to work. And so I've been really thinking about, how is it possible that we haven't grown up in the way that we should? And we are missing opportunities right now in the middle of a crisis to grow up and become more like Jesus, because we haven't actually started to serve and reach out to our community. Then when I think about that, I feel a lot of pressure, because I go, oh goodness, well, if we're all waiting for someone to mobilize the troops, which I think we'll do every now and then, and troops as a euphemism, I don't want to be like, you're a Christian troop, right? I'm not saying those things, but waiting for some kind of mobilization, frankly, that puts a lot of pressure to go, man, got to come up with the next event, but also got to do this, and man, I need to talk to, I got to talk about a budget, and I need to go meet with that person, boy, I need to spend some time. And all of a sudden there just creates this pan of going, if the way by which we grow up is by serving, and I don't know how to compile that, and yet our staff are so busy, how do we solve this problem, right? And how do we help you grow up? And then also, how do we help serve our community? And if helping growing up and serving our community are connected together, that seems to be pretty urgent that we figure out how to do that. So how do we stop being gatekeepers? And I started studying something called blockchain. I won't bore you with it. It's a place that where Bitcoin comes from. It's this kind of this technology that decentralizes authority and takes away the intermediary. Essentially, it distributes kind of the qualification of something's value, money or whatever, to multiple computers, multiple devices, multiple places where there is no spearhead. It decentralizes it, and it creates a cryptography by which they can assure that each of the pieces are correct and accurate, and there's no way to change one without changing them all. And if you have to change them all, you have to add a new block. Again, don't want to bore you with it, but what I became pretty amazed by in the technology is how quickly you could get confirmation about something's value or someone's ownership of what the value is. So in all of that, what blockchain has done, and with both, Bitcoin, other types of currencies, and with real estate, what it's done is it's taken away the need for there to be an intermediary. It's taken away the need for you and I, for exchanging money, to have to go through a bank to do it. It's taking away the need, if you're buying a piece of property, from you having to go through a lawyer to do the deed search as an intermediary to do it. So what blockchain technology is kind of creating is a place where there is more time and more resources, because you're not wasting your time and resources on the middleman or the intermediary. And I am wondering if what's happened at kind of a top-down church level is if there's time and resources getting caught up there, particularly slowing things down, and you and I not feeling like we have permission to go and do ministry and go serve the needs of our community. So these are just the things I'm thinking about. And so as I think through that, I think through blockchain, I think through how do we decentralize responsibility and decision making to each and every one of us, and how do we actually mobilize every single one of us to go and do what God's called us to, because the way by which we grow up and the way by which we bring the kingdom of heaven to earth might be one and the same, by connecting to one another and serving one another. That word "one another" shows up an awful lot in the scriptures. And so how do we do that? And this is what I'm thinking about. And I'm wondering if this is where we need to go in 2021. So again, most of the time I try to get it all, package it all, work through it all. But today, I just wanted to share with you a little bit about what I'm thinking about. And here's the first thing I'm thinking. I'm thinking that every single person in our church should be connected to a group, or a team, or a task force, whatever. That word "group" has some bad connotations to you. that every single person in the family of God, if they believe that Jesus is Lord, God tells those people it's not good for humankind to be alone. And so how do we help every single one of us be connected to a group or team, right? And so thinking about how do we make sure that all 500 adults that are going to listen to this, watch this, connect to this, come to church this weekend, whatever this, how do we help all of them connect to a group? But not just how do we help them connect to a group, how do we actually help every single group connect to a mission, right? Because growing up happens by reaching out. So how do we connect every single person to a group or team or task force? And how do we help every single one of those groups, teams, or task force is connect to a mission? And how do we make sure that we define that every single mission should be connected to the least, the lost, or the lonely? Yes, why the least, the lost, or the lonely? Because if we're going to grow up and become like Jesus and we're going to seek Jesus, you want to find Jesus, you can read throughout the scriptures. You know where he was always found? He's found with the least, the lost, and the lonely. So how do we connect every single person in our church to a group? And how do we help every single one of those groups identify a mission that group, that team, that task force can participate in? Now, our church as a whole will still do big, massive movements, but how do we help you connect to a group? And how do we help your group connect to a mission? And how do we ensure that each one of those missions are connected to the least, the lost, and the lonely? In other words, how do we get out of the way, stop being the intermediary, help you find community, and help your community understand that there's a mission that has to happen if we're going to grow up and if the kingdom of heaven is going to invade this world? Jesus tells us this way: if we let our light so shine before men, people will see our good work, and guess what they'll do? They'll glorify our Father in heaven. So how do we help every single person connect to a group? And how do we help every single group be connected to a mission? And how do we help every single mission connect to the least, the lost, or the lonely? So typically I'd go, well, here's what's next. Today I just wanted to share with you what I'm thinking about. But what I do understand is, in order to be able to do these things, one, we need some real help in sorting through how do we help every single person connect to a group. So there's two different pieces of that. One, what do I need to do to convince you that you should be in a group? So I'd love to hear some feedback from you on, hey, here's what would be helpful for me to be willing to be in a group, a ministry team, or a task force, right? Now, on the other side of that, there's a lot of movement that has to happen in order for groups to have groups. One is we need great leaders. And so while I'm thinking about how do we develop good leaders, what I hope you hear in this is you should probably be, maybe it's time for you to be one of those leaders that helps people get connected to a group, and it helps groups get connected to a mission, and helps make sure those missions are all connected to the least, the lost, or the lonely. And so two different pieces. How can I help you and convince you and to get in a group? And then how can you help me organize and administrate these groups? So how can I help you, convince you, assemble you, whatever that is? Could you give me some feedback? Josh@clcfamily.church, or you can text our church at 610-869-2140. I'll get those messages. So how can I help you, convince you, lead you to consider being in a group now, or at least in the beginning of 2021? And then how many of you have gifts and skills and administration? Could you self-identify yourself and go, I'd be happy to help assemble people in groups? And then the last piece of this is many of you are passionate about mission. You, by nature, know, your ears on the ground, your feet are on the ground, you know what's going on in your community, and you know where the least, the lost, and the lonely are. What I'd ask you is not just bring that to me, but would you bring yourself into this movement and go, hey, I'd be willing to help curate and create resources and databases and points of connection for all sorts of ministry here in our community and in our nation and in our world that people can connect to, because we want, I think this is what I'm thinking about, that every single one of us should be connected to a group, and every single one of those groups should be connected to a mission, because that's how we grow up. And every single one of those missions should be connected to the least, the lost, or the lonely, because that's who Jesus came to seek and save. So could you consider it? Would you pray about this and pray for our church, and so we kind of solidify what this would look like and how we go about doing it? How do we decentralize mission to resource you and equip you and declare you can do it? We as a church staff, we as a church leadership, we as a church body can help. So that's what I'm thinking about. Every single person connected to a group, every single group connected to a mission, and every single one of those missions connected to the least, the lost, and the lonely. And sure seems like there's a lot of least, lost, and lonely right now, and maybe you feel like one of those. And so, if that's the case, would you just let yourself make yourself known here, Josh at CLC Family? Text me 610-869-2140, or call the church office. And love to help you find a group, and love to help challenge your group to connect to a mission, and love to see those missions serve the least, lost, and lonely. Thanks for listening with what's been going on in my head. And this weekend we'll finish up the Jesus for President series. It will be worth your time, because we will see the president of the kingdom, Jesus, start arranging his cabinet. And guess what? He wants you in his cabinet, and he wants you to do good in this world. Can't wait for you to hear about it this weekend. Love you guys, and I'll see you